the last thing that we want to go ahead and talk about here within our section on sampling is the idea of bias. So as I state here in the note, bias often exists within sampling on every study, regardless of whether the sample was collected randomly or not. And so this really means that we should, if we're collecting samples, we want to make sure that we're really careful to consider problems with certain types of sampling techniques that are being used in different scenarios. So for example, it might be the case that maybe I do something like one of the following examples here in number 6. I want to identify at least one reason why the sampling techniques that are shown here may actually contain some bias. So here's part A. Suppose that a teacher is going to ask students that attend office hours, maybe even a random collection of students that attend office hours, how unfair they believe the class exams have been thus far. Now, even if this sample was obtained randomly, there are probably going to be some big problems with asking this. Can you imagine this? Like, imagine you were actually to come into, say, my office hours, and I just asked you, right? I said, so do you believe the exams in our class are fair or unfair? What? I mean, is it possible I might not get an honest answer from you? I mean, I guess that might depend on your comfort level with me as an individual, but you could probably pretty easily start to imagine that, gosh, if I was to walk into somebody else's office and they asked me something, it's just like, I might not give a fully honest response, right? I could write that down here. Students might not give an honest response. And so even though I might collect a sample of data, it might not actually be representative of what people feel, right? It'd be kind of like if you went around asking people, like, do you cheat on your taxes? Not many people might want to admit that, right? But there might be some other reasons for bias here. Maybe it's the case that the people that I'm asking don't actually represent the average student in the classroom, right? Because these are students that are maybe coming to office hours. And so we could say, like, maybe these students are students who study more because they're already students, right, that are going out of their way to attend office hours and ask questions. So it might be the case that I'm just asking the people that are the most prepared, do you think things are difficult? And so I'm not really getting a sense of what everybody feels, right? Like if I was only asking people in the class that got A's on the exam, did you think the exam was easy or hard? Then obviously those students might say, I don't know, I thought it was pretty easy. But that doesn't mean that's what most people felt. So sometimes when we're asking a question, we have to be aware that there could be some bias in the responses based on a variety of different factors. Take a look here at part B. A student finds a sample of other student opinions on Rate My Professor of a teacher they are thinking of taking next semester. Well, we talked about this a little bit in the last example, but why might this here have some bias to it? It's just Rate My Professor. Everybody uses Rate My Professor. Heck, I remember being in school using Rate My Professor. Well, we could think about it maybe like this. So, why does someone go to Rate My Professor to write a review to begin with? Maybe you have. Maybe you haven't. But immediately there, you should be able to ask, why have you gone to write a review at Rate My Professor? If you have. And if you haven't, why haven't you? And we could right there almost start to identify a little bit of bias. So maybe we could start to say that, like, students who write reviews, students who write reviews might be the students. So it might be students who had really good or potentially bad experiences. Right? Like if you really loved a professor, right? You were like, this is the best professor ever. You might go write a comment. If you hated them, if you're like, this is unbelievable, I need to slam this professor, you might also go write a comment. So, but if you're the person who's never written a comment on Rate My Professor, maybe it's because you're just like, oh, I don't know, man, didn't really feel the need to. Right? And so your voice as that kind of neutral-ish person, the person who didn't think it was important enough, might not be represented there. So we can see again that that doesn't invalidate the experiences that are written on there, but it just means that it might not be a representative experience. It might just be that individual experience. And so we have to be careful when using things like this. Bias always creeps in, and we have to really make sure that we try to control for as much bias as possible. Whether by, in something like Part A, maybe I ask students to express their opinions anonymously so we can get around maybe not giving honest answers. Maybe I try to make sure I change my sample. Instead of just asking people how to attend office hours, maybe I do something more like a systematic sample and go alphabetically down the roster of the class so I get a representative view and I'm not only asking certain groups of individuals. So there's lots of things we need to control for. We always have to be on the lookout for bias.